Hi. Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Myself, Girisha Bukanakere. I am working as a CX engineer for SAO team based out in Bangalore. I am currently working for Bharti Airtel automation project from last 8 months. We are going to discuss about on reconciliation topic today. Today, we are going to discuss about the reconciliation for the huge network. We haven't done till today, right? We handled it for 100K, 150K, 200K max, right? In a Bharti Airtel network, we are going to reconcile 500K services, right? This is quite different than other reconciliations because of the scale. We'll discuss about the agenda of this slides. So we'll discuss about challenges first and what is the adventurous we gone through to come up with this solution. And we'll discuss about how the ODI framework looks like and how the workflow looks like and what is the success story from customer as well as Cisco. Certainly, we have to think behind our limitations, right? After implementing some of the success stories, we will leave with some of the limitations. We'll discuss about that. Finally, we will enter into the question and answer session. So this is basically a challenge which we have, right? It's a huge network, pan-India coverage, right? There are around 500K L3 and L2 network services across India. This is built over 20 years, right? Many team, many people, many managers involved, and it's basically a heterogeneous network. We have a large variations of services because if I take an example of MPLS L3, that itself is a 300K services. 300K services has so many variations in it, in terms of routing, in terms of QoS policy, in terms of managed mode and unmanaged mode, right? As and when we started doing the discovery and reconciliation, this is basically an insightful journey to the customer as well as Cisco. Because it's not just about finding any deviation, we are finding some variations which was not part of our standard service. Right? So other big problem with is like critical operations team always go and touch the network. We can't avoid them because they have to serve their customer. It is unavoidable for any customers. We can mitigate to certain level, but we can't make it like 100% free of touching a network. Right? So basically, we keep fixing any deviations. We keep doing the discovery and reconciliation. So since there are manual activities involved directly in the network devices, certainly they may add some more deviations into network. Right? Basically, that is where I told it's a growing elephant. Right? It doesn't stop. Right? When it will stop? When they stop touching a network device directly. Right? So there is a common phenomena with the customer and the people who are like very new to the NSO. They think, okay, there are 300K services or 500K services. It's like, why are you taking that much time? Like, that's their question is like, in order to create 300K entries in the database, you may take half day or 1 day, it's fine. So I wanted to clear it off to the customer. I clarified to the customer, many stakeholders. NSO is not a relational database. It is much more than that. It is actually an integrated config DB, right? It doesn't just create an entry of the database and move away. It has to create a database entry. Along with it has to create a relationship with the device model, and it has to make a ref count. It has to create a back pointers. It has to run its own fastmap algorithm to create all the integrated data, right? There are some limitations, right? It takes much more than whatever RDBMS takes, right? Because it's not a RDBMS mean to be. It's like it is a config DB. Right? These are all the current challenges with which we started with an adventurous journey, right? So we started with the MPLS L3 services. They're actually around 300K in count. We did a couple of discovery and reconciliation in our non-production environment by taking all the device tree backups. We started doing that. We ran a couple of data activity for the MPLS L3 network. We found 50% deviation in the first place. Right? We went to the customer saying that, okay, we could able to reconcile only 150K of the services. We weren't able to do it for 150K because it is out of standard. Whatever the standard we defined, whatever the standard we discussed, and whatever the standard we created in NSO, these data is deviations from them. Right? Let's say it's like, is it all deviations? No. That is where I told you it's an insightful journey to the Airtel as well as Cisco. As and when we discovered complete network, they also started understanding, okay, there is a variation. In some cases, we don't put out policy. In some cases, we don't put in policy, right? But in a standard service model, it is all mandatory. Right? Basically, this is in a journey wherein which we negotiated again with the requirement, and certainly we make the certain conditions, okay, in and out policy is not mandatory. Right? This is just an example. There are so many variations like that. Let's say like out of 300K, there are 2K, 3K services like that. Right? There are so many variations, like 10 variations, it will add up at least 30, 40,000 into a reconciliation world, and we have to adjust our service model. Right? Certainly after adjusting something and they corrected something in the network, we reran one more time. That reduced to 41%, right? 41% deviations and 59% successfully reconciled. Right? Still we left with 41% deviations. Again, it's like there is a discussion started. These are the deviations in the network. You have to look after. Again, customer told, okay, these are all the certain variations. And then we adopted in our service model. Fine. Like they corrected something in the network. Fine. We run for the third time. That reduced to 29%. It's a really huge achievement. It's like we reduced to 29% now. Another way, it's like we are left with 29% step. How many more runs we can do with this? Right? How long NSO takes to rerun? Right? That's the question the management asked. Cisco management as well as the customer management. How long it will take to run the complete 300K reconciliation? Right? I said to him 6 full days. Why 6 full days? You are talking about 144 hours to rerun complete network again? We can't live with it. Right? It's a tough question. I mean, I wanted to quote when we did the reconciliation for the first time, it took 31 days because as and when we create normal service for the normal provisioning and normal CRUD operations without load, everything seems to be fine. Everything works fine. So NSODB started filling with the service data. There are so many lookups which we use across the service tree and other things. So we have to mitigate those problems, those lookups, and we have to do some external lookup, everything. And there are some resource manager dependency, right? Let's say it's like resource manager started using it up to 40K services creation. There was no problem. Started a bit slow after 40K. Then after 80K is a bigger slow. It's like it was taking a single call for the resource pool. It was taking 8 seconds, right? 8 seconds is a huge time in this network, right? If it is normal provisioning side, there's no problem. Even though you're taking 40 seconds, 50 seconds to put into the devices end-to-end provisioning flow, there will be no problem at all. As and when we are doing it in the bulk, each and every fraction of second matters, right? We mitigate all the problems. We bring down to 6 full days of run. Finally, how much time we are taking per service? It is just 1.7 seconds. right? When we talk about 6 full days, everyone, okay, they are going to take 6 full days. I have to completely stop my production activity, right? Basically, ultimately, I'm going to take 1.7 seconds to reconcile both primary and secondary services. This is like joyful journey we had with the customers like for almost 2 months, right? Then customer told us like, okay, we are left with 20%. It may in another reruns, is a couple of reruns, it may come down to a 10%. Right? We have to leave it at this. It's not something like we can close it immediately, either from the customer deviation perspective or service adjustment perspective, right? This is where the on-demand reconciliation framework is all about. So we have LSA architecture, NSO, CFS, and RFS layer. Basically, it has different RFS layers. I am illustrating just one RFS layer over here. So we have 5 RFS layers, in fact, right? We have a BPA running on top of it, right? And we have a customer OSS BSS system, and BPA has its own UI to do the change management, right? Ultimately, what is the use of reconciliation? It's like why we are going to do the reconciliation in the customer network, right? The ultimate goal of doing the reconciliation of the customer network is to support a chain management and permanent disconnect management, right? That's the primary goal of doing a reconciliation, so that as NSO, we can support end-to-end CRUD operations. The another primary reason of reconciliation is to use NSO DB as a network inventory for them, right? So there are 2 reasons. That's where we go for the reconciliation. In this specific case, how we designed is basically predominantly for the change and disconnect management. Either customer can push change order for a particular circuit, either from the customer OSS BSS system or from the BPA UI. Right? So it enters into the BPA core. We have an external DB API. This is basically a separate application, keep running, and it periodically query the device data. What kind of device data it queries? I wanted a data where exactly this service currently running, in which device it's presently running, right? There are so many circuit movement happens in the network because of so many reasons. Let's say it's like the server is heavily loaded, the backend team will come, the operation team will come. They eventually move all the services from that router to another router. And there are cases wherein which this is a pan-India network, right? They have customers ranging from a small customer, medium customer, and a large customer. A small customers might keep moving their office location from one location to another location, right? They have to move the endpoint from one location to another location. That's another reason of moving a service from one router to another router, right? It's keep happening in the background. We can't avoid it because they have to serve the customer as soon as possible. That used to happen all the time, right? For that reason, we kept an external DB. This is periodically runs every 2 hours once on all the devices, all the intelligence devices, which are running in the network. So it queries the data of in a circuit where exactly it resides. One is the primary router and the secondary router, right? As and when there is a change and disconnect management enters into the BPA core, what it does is like it invokes an external DB asking where and all this particular circuit is running, right? Irrespective of whether that circuit is already reconciled or not. We don't know, right? Even though it is reconciled 3 months back or 3 days back, right? It might have moved to a different router altogether from last day or last month. So basically, we can't rerun the reconciliation again and again because it takes a huge amount of time, right? The next slides will show the complete picture of a workflow where exactly the flow gone through is like there's a OSS-based system. This starts within a change or disconnect management for a particular circuit. It doesn't tell, okay, you do the ODR for this particular circuit. It does normal change management and disconnect management. Right? What BPA does it like, it goes to the config DB, takes the data, right? How many devices this circuit is done with, right? Then BPA processes internally the data which is coming from the config DB. Okay, good to go. Then what it does is like basically delete the existing circuit from NSO, and we call in a ODR. ODR is basically we are calling on a single on a specific routers for a particular circuit. It may take is like 10 seconds, 20 seconds, right? Once we discover the complete data, either it end up in a deviation or in a created circuit, in a proper standard circuit, right? If there is deviation is coming in, so we returning back to the OSS based system. We don't do any handling of the change management at this point in time, right? The NOC engineer who is sitting there, network engineer who is sitting in the OS based system, will get a deviation data. Okay, this specific circuit has some deviations. I have to fix it in the network. Right? This is basically we are providing a flexibility to do it in on-demand basis. Right? Once if there are no deviation, then reconcile the circuit from the NSO CFS to RFS, and it's like create all the entries in the device tree. Basically, apply the change or a disconnect management on top of the latest circuit. Right? That will be applied onto the direct device and returning in a result. If there is an error, it will be returned, or successful results will be returned. So we are going to talk about some of the success stories, what we achieved for Bharti and what we achieved ourselves as a Cisco, right? We talk about the customer success story first. We provide a time flexibility to adopt network deviations to them, right? You do it your own time as and when it is required, right? If you're doing it upfront, we are good, right? As business needed, it's a big relief for the customer. Okay, I am not supposed to stop everything to do this deviation fixes, right? So there is a certain advantage. Like there are some new service variations we discovered while doing the entire activity that can be adopted very easily, because whatever the logic applied the last time, before making any changes to that circuit in a network or before removing in a circuit from the network, we're actually adopting in a latest reconciliation logic which we are applied on the NSO server, right? Change should go via NSO BPA automation. Yes, certainly we have to go in this path to bring in a complete resilience in the network, right? If we have to standardize the network, it should happen, right? Basically, the streamlining will take some time because there are so many teams, so many people are involved in the customer operations and provisioning team, change management team. Right? Certainly, they can start doing it from the most happening cases. What is the most happening cases like from the UAT front? It's like provisioning, right? They wanted to do the change management, they wanted to do the basically provisioning of a new service, permanent disconnection. These are all the things they keep doing it, right? There are some additional features. It's going to come with its own timeline, right? So let's talk about the Cisco success story by adopting this. It's all automated now, end to end. It's basically geared. If there are any recon bugs, it's like software tend to have bugs, right? We can't have 100% bug-free software in first cut or second cut, right? Other use cases, delivery timeline doesn't change, right? This is what I was talking about. There are some service audit feature, right? That has its own delivery timeline. As and when we don't adopt this on-demand stuff, they would have pushed us to finish that one before going for the UAT or the live of the system. Less chances of outage because we are always going and checking the latest copy of the data from the network before applying a change. It's just a matter of 10-15 seconds delay between reconciliation and applying changes, right? That's the minimal gap which we have. That's a big relief for us. Like wrong config push doesn't happen. This is one of the success stories. These are all the success stories which we have as a Cisco. Certainly, is like we achieved some of the things. There will be limitations, right? Only in imagination there will be no limitation, right? NSOs certainly can't be used as a real-time service inventory system in the realistic world, because as and when there is a out of band changes keep happening, always there will be a disconnect between the NSO and the real network which is running. That's one of the limitations. The another limitations will be increasing the. There are corner cases wherein which I was talking about the external DB, right? External DB can't query like in the real time. It takes its own time, right? It has, in order to find in a particular circuit in a real time, it has to go through like 1,000 devices. Right? That's impossible. What we do is like there is a cron job running every 2 hours once, right? Basically, so within that 2 hours window, if you are doing multiple shifting of in a circuit, right, one router to another router, that's one of the corner case we can't support. There is a requirement of additional relational DB because we don't want to do that extra burden with the existing UNESCO system, because every 2 hours it runs and keep updating, right? While updating is like whatever the customer orders keep coming, that will be piled up, right? We can't process both customer orders as well as this cron job together, right? We have own limitations because we have only one write thread at a time. So basically, this addition along with the additional relation DB, every 2 hours it's going and querying the device. It's read-only activity. It doesn't do any modification to it because still it little impacts the device performance, right? And the last limitation would be like is kind of a double-sided sword. Like deviation fixes and the reconciliation code changes becomes critical. You can't stop them anytime soon until unless everything adopted as soon as possible. Right? We provide a flexibility. Within that flexibility, every utilization is proper. It's okay. I mean, if it's over-utilized, it's like even though after 2 years, okay, we don't worry anyway. On-demand reconciliations keep running. Right? Ultimately, that increases the change and disconnect management time, as well as this becomes an habitual continuous changes to the reconciliation code as well as the deviation fixes. Right? Yeah, that's all I have. If you have any questions, you can now.
Thank you, Girisha. There's a good presentation on a very interesting topic. And I'm sure there's a lot of interest about how you did this that people want to hear about. I noticed early on that you had a comment about the network being 5 lakhs network. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, and sorry to mention that. I know that 5 lakhs will not be understood by most of the world people. So this is actually 500K. So 500K we are talking about. Yeah. While explaining, I mentioned 500K. It is in the slides. I corrected it later. I mentioned as 5 lakhs. It's basically 500K.
It's all right. I mean, it's just fun. This is India, right? So it's the numbers are enormous. So yeah. Do you think you can scale to the need that you have in India? Is NSO going to be holding up for what you need?
Yes, certainly we had same doubt when we started off, because this is one of the biggest reconciliation we started off. It's like we knew that certainly we did the reconciliation for 100K, 150K max, which I know of, right? So then we started analyzing the things, mimicking the environment within our local and taking the production copy within our local and try to mimic it and build the service around that. I think certainly NSO adopts it. It's like, that's the interesting thing. It's like if you give enough core CPU cores and memory, obviously it supports. There is no issue with that. We are almost reconciled 300K plus services at this point in time. NSO keep running. There are no issues.
That's good to hear. When I talk to other service providers about reconciliation, they often talk about how many variants of the service that they found when they started this project. Oh, when we did this reconciliation code, we found so many of these variations. Do you have any sort of metric like that for what you found when you started this?
Certainly, as we have around 5 to 6 different service types. We are supporting MPLS services. They are around 300K services. We have internet services around 50K. And we have SEN L2 services and L3 services around 1 lakh. like it's nothing but 100K. So basically, it is quite interesting. In MPLS services, we are supporting around 70 variations. We have around 250 plus attributes within a service. This is a huge service which we are supporting reconciliation as well as a provisioning. We have variations in the routing, we have variations in a managed mode, we have variations in the policies, we have variations whatnot. We have certainly variations of all, right? Routing none, routing EAGRP, routing OSPF, routing DGP, routing static. These are all the, like, I'm just mentioning few.
Yeah. So did you see any sort of difference when you started this reconciliation project, when the code first hit the actual values that people had configured manually previously? Did you see a reduction in the number of different variations, or how did you deal with this?
Yeah, certainly this is built over 20 years, right? Even customer involved with many teams, many managers got changed, many resources got changed. Even though there are some deviations we reported in the first cut or the second cut, so the customer came back saying that it's not actually a deviation, it's actually a variation, another variation, right? Let's say it's like there is one example wherein which we maintained in our a standard service, in and out policy should be mandatory thing, right? We found some deviated circuit around 2K, which doesn't have an out policy, which doesn't have an in policy, right? The customer came back saying that, okay, we support such kind of services as well. We have to include them, right? It's like wonderful journey in terms of insightfulness, understanding their network from their perspective and our perspective, and keep growing together.
Thank you very much. There's another question on the chat, but there's no time for that, I'm afraid. So I have to cut here, and we will have to discuss more details around this offline then. We have the app, so we can certainly go on there and discuss all this. I hope you can take the time to answer questions there too. So with that, thank you very much, Girisha, and I hand over to Niklas again.
Yeah. Thank you, Girisha, for a very nice presentation. I really like the analogy with the elephant having to eat that one. You really have to be determined. So great, and thank you, Jon, for asking the questions. And please continue asking questions on the chat.